Hi, my name is Jenny Kimmel. I am here to present to you about working with NGRI consumers. Next slide, please. Just a reminder, a brief overview. A consumer who commits a crime can be found NGRI and then diverted from those criminal proceedings to probate for receiving mental health services under a civil commitment court order. Once these individuals are released from the hospital, they cannot be NGRI status for more than 5 years. And the CMH should petition to keep the AOT or a combined AOT in place for as long as that individual meets the criteria as a person requiring treatment. If ever it's assessed that the person is no longer meeting that legal criteria, the NGRI committee must be notified immediately before the current order expires. Next slide, please. A CMH that is treating a NGRI consumer has specific requirements that they have to do. They have to complete an individualized risk mitigating treatment plan that needs to be approved by the NGRI committee. If there is a restriction in that risk mitigating treatment plan, it still needs to go through BTPRC committee. And they have to complete memos to the NGRI committee at regular intervals, and also for any changes, concerns, or leave of absences. They have to maintain required probate court documentation for as long as clinically appropriate. And then all AOT laws and procedures are also applicable to these cases. The NGRI tasks are in addition to the AOT. Next slide, please. This is a copy and paste from MDHHS. This is the CMH contractual agency paperwork. It delineates that we have to complete 30 and 90-day reports. And this delineates that we have to complete progress reports or memos at very specific times. So if somebody is a direct community release from CFP, they need 3 30-day memos, a 30, a 60, and a 90-day memo. And then we have to have 90, 180, and 270-day memos submitted to the NGRI committee. And that is from the date of the court order. We submit those memos to the NGRI committee with a copy to the regional hospital. We also have to submit all court paperwork to the probate court and also the regional hospital and NGRI committee, and give them copies of received court orders. Next slide, please. So what does that look like? Say for this example, an AOT order is effective on January 1st, 2024, and the individual was released from the hospital on 2/15. If they were a direct community release, you would have 30-day, 60-day, and 90-day memos due in March, April, and May. If they were not, if they went from CFP to a state hospital for a period of time and then were released, you would have the 90-day, 6-month review, 270-day, and 1 year that is due from the date of the court order. I've created an Excel sheet to help keep track of that. And if we could please share that real quick so I can show how that can be used. All right, so in this example, we have me, who is NGRI, and my outpatient treatment began on 4/26/2024. My NGRI oversight has to be completed by 4/26/2029. It cannot go past 5 years. It can be shorter than that, but it cannot be longer than that. With this, I'm on a current 1-year court order that began on Valentine's Day. And since I wasn't a direct community release, we would go directly to the blue section. And I would have a memo due in May and August. And can you scroll over a little bit, please? November, and then the court order would need to be extended with a memo in January. If I was a direct community release, those 3 memos need to be completed that are in the gray. With this Excel sheet, as you type in, it will auto-populate the dates. So on the next line, if you could put today's date under court order began, please. And that immediately auto-populates the dates and all of the sections. And if you scroll to the left a little bit, the NGRI outpatient began, if we put, say, yesterday's date into that spot, that section will auto-populate the gray sections for you. All right. You can go ahead and close that and go back. And next slide, please. So each county has a slightly different process, but the NGRI reporting requirements remain the same. So no matter what, you still have to complete those memos. You still have to keep the NGRI committee in the loop about everything that is happening with them. And but how you submit that paperwork might look a little bit different for each county. They might have specific staff that do that task, or maybe their case managers do that task. So the COFR agency is responsible for the case, and the CMH providing services should provide the COFR agency the necessary information and documents for the COFR to submit that documentation. But really, this needs to be a conversation with the COFR agency to have an understanding between the two of you of who is going to be responsible for what and what your processes will look like for each individual consumer that is a COFR that is also NGRI. And you should also consider petitioning to transfer the venue, because it's usually best to have the order that the individual reside, or the order for AOT in the county in which the individual resides. Next slide, please. Sometimes there is difficulty acquiring services for our NGRI consumers. You'll really have to think outside the box as much as you can. If you can't get X, what additional services or multiple services might mitigate the risk for this consumer? So for example, you might have somebody that needs residential services, but you don't have it available right now in your county. You'll have to think outside the box and assess, could they live with a responsible family member or in a room and board with ACT or case management and community living support, some peer support services. The additional services mitigating the risk might not be the ideal solution, but what can we put in place that will mitigate the risk until we could do the ideal solution? Next slide, please. Also, sometimes we have difficulty with compliance with our risk mitigating treatment plans and the AOT orders. And when that happens, we should really increase intervention efforts with using motivational interviewing and stages of change. Having the case manager see the individual more frequently, ask for urine drug screens, consider the why they're not compliant, and try to problem solve those barriers. Do they need a higher level of outpatient care to support them doing what they need to do? Do they need additional services such as peer support? If hospitalization is needed to stabilize their mental health symptoms, then we should always get a pickup order and take them to the pre-admission screening unit to try to have them hospitalized locally and stabilize, and then bring them back into the community. And always make sure to keep the NGRI committee in the loop of the concerns and your attempts and plans to address the concerns. Next slide, please. Right, and now we're at the Q&A section.